On the phone, we
Yeah,
have Baseball Hall of Famer Brooks Robinson. How you doing today, Mr. Robinson?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to see you're doing well. How did you end
Well,
up?
I'm doing pretty good.
That's great. How did you end up getting drafted by the Orioles?
How'd I? Well, I didn't. We didn't have the draft when I signed. Draft didn't start till later. When I got out, the day I graduated from high school, I had 5 or 6 teams that were interested in signing me, and there was the Yankees in Baltimore and Boston. 3 or 4 other teams had inquired, and so I got $4,000. That was the most you could get unless you were a bonus player, and no one wanted to make me a bonus player for more money. So they thought I had a chance to make the big leagues when they signed me for $4,000. But that's how I picked Baltimore over everyone else because they were the old St. Louis Browns in '53. They came to Baltimore in '54, and Paul Richards, who was the manager then, said, "Look, son, if you do pretty well, you got a chance to play in the big leagues very quickly here in Baltimore." So I signed in '55, went to York, Pennsylvania, did well, and the last 2 weeks of the big league season, I got to play in the big leagues when I was 18. So I made the right choice.
You grew up a St. Louis Cardinals fan. Did you wonder yourself, how come the Cardinals don't want me, but the team that
Well,
just left
you know
left
what?
St. Louis did?
There was a gentleman named Freddie Hahn, a well-respected scout there in the Arkansas area, and he just didn't think I was going to be a big league player, and that's the reason the Cardinals did not pursue me. I was a big Cardinal fan because that was really the only game that we got on radio, and Stan Musial was certainly my hero, and I got a chance to play with him later on. But that's the reason that I didn't sign with the Cardinals.
With the Orioles, did you have a mentor when you came up to them or someone who kind of helped you out, or were you on your own?
Oh no, I think there were a lot of guys who kind of helped me out. I was in the minor leagues in '55 and '56, and when I came to in '57, I made the team. I was the opening day third baseman in '57. We played the Washington Senators in the presidential opener over at Old Griffin Stadium, and the first baseman was George Kell. And George Kell grew up about 60 miles from where I grew up. I grew up in Little Rock. George Kell grew up in Swifton, Arkansas, but he came to the Orioles in 1956. And of course, he was one of my heroes growing up. I knew about George Kell, and he was a great player with the Detroit Tigers. And he came to Baltimore, and he helped me not only on the field but off the field. And he was just a terrific friend of mine. And he passed away probably about 4 or 5 years ago. But he was an outstanding player, and took me to my first stage play in New York City. So he kind of helped me off the field too.
What show did you see?
I don't remember. I think it was Oklahoma. But we had a good time. His wife and I went, George's wife, and they kind of took me under the wing the whole year, really. So we couldn't have worked out better. And you know, the thing that really was wonderful was the fact in 1983, that's the day I went into the Baseball Hall of Fame, on the regular ballot, George went in on the veterans vote. So here are George Kell and Brooks Robinson on the same stage going into the Hall of Fame. And that was just wonderful.
Was it hard coming up to the majors as an 18-year-old? Because that's extremely rare, even back then.
Oh, sure. It was hard. I was overmatched. The players were a lot better than I was. I learned a good lesson that year when I was 18 years old. The first game I played in against Washington Senators was in Baltimore. I got a hit the first time up. I went I think it was the second time up, but I went 2 for 4 that day, knocked in a run, and I said, well, I think this is going to be an easy deal, I called my mother and dad in Little Rock. I said, Mom, Dad, first game, 2 for 4. Man, this is my cup of tea. Well, I went 0 for 18 the next 18 times I hit, and I struck out 10 times. So I knew those guys were way ahead of me, and I had a lot to learn.
Before you became the regular starting third baseman, and you were up and down to the minors. How difficult an adjustment was that for you psychologically?
Well, what happened, and I played in the minor leagues in '56. I went to San Antonio, which I knew that where I was going to play, and then they brought me up at the end of the year again, which was a big thrill. But I made the team in '57, and I played 2 weeks. I hurt my knee, had a knee operation. I was out like for 3 months. I was out 2 months with the knee, and then went down to San Antonio, and they brought me back a month later. So I missed 3 months of the season. For 1958, I was there the whole year, and didn't really do anything spectacular. I struggled most of the year offensively, and then in '59, I was about to get drafted after the '58 season for 2 years, but they had the program where you could go 6 months active duty, 5.5 years in the reserve of the National Guard. Well, I joined the Arkansas National Guard the day the season was open, and I spent 6 months active duty at Fort Chaffee and Fort Hood, Texas. And then I got out right when the season started in '59. And I was there for the first month playing in and out. And then Paul Richards told me, he said, we're going to send you to Vancouver, which is our AAA team. And that kind of knocked me for a loop, because I think it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. And Paul Richards knew more than I did, but it was kind of an ego thing. I said, oh my gosh, I'm going back to the minor leagues after spending a whole year next year, and I was looking forward to 1959 being the year. But anyway, I went back to the minor leagues, and he said, I'll bring you up in a month. You just go down and play your way into shape. Well, a lot of times when they say that, you never get the call back to the major leagues. That was really what was on my mind. But anyway, after about a month, they called me back to the major leagues. I had done extremely well at Vancouver. I hit 330-something, and I got to play the rest of the year. And I was really a different player in '59. I seemed to be a little stronger, a little wiser. I ended up well. And then 1960, that was the first really good year I had in the major leagues. I was ended up, the Orioles made a run to the World Series against the Yankees, and I was the third in the MVP voting behind Maris and Mantle. All three guys, it was the first time anyone had received three guys had received 200 votes or more.
Yeah, you started your All-Star string in Gold Glove string in '60. You won the Gold Glove Award 16 straight years, and you went to 18 All-Star games.
That's correct. Yeah, I did win the Gold Glove starting that year in '60. I was in the backup that year. As my first All-Star game, I was the backup to Frank Malzone in the All-Star games. I think they played 2 that year. It was 2 or 3 years we played 2 All-Star games to raise money for the pension fund, baseball's players' pension fund. And but I backed up Frank Malzone. I did get into both games, and of course it was a thrill to Ted Williams. That was his last year. He was on those teams, and just being around those guys, it was one of the biggest thrills I've ever had.
1960 was also the year that you got married. Is the story about how you met your future wife true?
Absolutely, yeah. I got my wife was a flight attendant for United Airlines, and of course all the teams flew United charters at that particular time. We had played a night game in Kansas City, and the plane flew in to pick us up that morning to take us to Boston. We had an off day, and So anyway, when I got on the plane, I saw my wife, Connie, at that particular time, and I was really, I liked what I saw, She was a beautiful gal, and we hit it off real well. I kept going back for a lot of iced tea during the trip. Anyway, we had a date that night in Boston and went to dinner, And our 54th wedding anniversary is in October this year, so it worked out real well. I did tell her when I got on, look, some of these guys might talk to you, but just remember, I'm the only single guy on this team. So anyway, she believed me.
Even though some of those guys were not married, right?
That's right.
You weren't going to drop the ball on that one either.
No, I wasn't, that's for sure. Little white lie didn't hurt.
How did you become such a good fielder?
I'm sorry?
How did you become such a good fielder?
How did I become such a good fielder? Certainly a lot of it was God-given talent, great hand-eye coordination. I was a second baseman. I played 4 years of American Legion baseball, and when I signed with the Orioles, I signed as a second baseman, and I played second base my first 50 games at York, Pennsylvania, and then they moved me to third, which was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it's more or less a reflex position, and there's a lot of concentration that goes into it, too. But it's like I say, it's one of those positions where 3 or 4 or 5 yards, and it's over and done with one way or the other. So I just always had the great hand-eye coordination. I would, even in high school when I played basketball, I was always kind of where the ball was. And that's the same way in baseball. That's the way I look at it. But I just had great anticipation, knew the hitters, knew how fast they run, knew who was pitching, and that's something I guess you learn with after playing a few years.
In 1964, you won the Most Valuable Player Award. You batted .317, drove in 118 runs. Do you think that sort of proved the skeptics wrong about your hitting ability?
Well, that was the key. I mean, everyone felt like the hitting would be the thing that I had to learn to do. They could see I was a great fielder, and they didn't know if I would ever hit big league pitching. That was even when I signed professionally back in '55. But it took me a while, and that was a big year for me, and never had another one like it. But I started hitting with a little power then too, and in 1960. I drove in 88 runs that year, I think, and I hit 14 home runs. Well, for some reason, Paul Richard moved me to leadoff the next year. I hit leadoff the whole year. But anyway, in '64, I was down in the order and I led the league in RBIs, and I was like second, I think, in hitting with .317. I don't know. I think Estrempi might have won it that year, someone with a .321, or Leva maybe. But that was the key. I mean, I got bigger and stronger and knew the pitchers better, and that was an exciting year. We had a good chance to win then, too, down to the last 5 or 6 days.
Who was your favorite manager to play for?
My favorite manager to play for was Paul Richards. Played for Earl Weaver, who was a great manager. I loved playing for him, too, but I just thought Paul Richards, I mean, when I signed, I just felt like he knew more about the game. He knew every position and what made that position tick. He was a catcher for the Tigers. He was in the '45 World Series. But he was a terrific manager. Never really got his due, but he put together the White Sox and then left, and they got in the World Series in '59. And he put together the Orioles, the basics of the Orioles, and we started winning a lot of games after 1960. But I loved playing for Earl Weaver. I had more fun playing for him than anyone else. He made me laugh a lot. When he'd go out with his little antics to the umpires, I'd just stand at third base and put my glove over my face and laugh like heck. He made everyone laugh. But he was a terrific manager. He had 25 players. He got them all involved in the game. No one sat long. You can't let players sit 2 or 3 weeks and put them in and expect them to play the way they're supposed to play. So he got everyone involved in the game. He had great coaches, and that helped too.
Now, you were already on the Orioles when Weaver broke into as a big league manager in July of '68. Was he the same manager then as he became later? Did he have that volatility from the outset?
Earl Weaver?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, oh yeah, he had that when he came. You know, he took over a All-Star game in 1968 when Hank Bauer was fired. I think everyone knew that Hank Bauer was going to get fired because Harry Dalton, who was the general manager, he signed Earl Weaver to manage his first year a few years earlier, and that was his guy, so it was just a matter of time. But no, Earl was all that way, always that way. He was a fiery manager. He was into the game, and he knew a lot about it. In fact, I think he learned a few things from Paul Richards because Paul was still managing when Earl signed to manage in the minor leagues. But Earl, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
One last question. What was your favorite moment in baseball?
My favorite moment in baseball certainly was winning the World Series in '66. As a youngster, when you sign a contract, you dream about playing in the minor leagues, arriving in the big leagues, winning the pennant, getting in a World Series, and winning. And we did that the first time around. And I can remember saying, hey, doesn't get any better than this. If we never win again, we can always say you're on the World Champions for a year. And that was my favorite moment.